And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 187th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 642nd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, September 17th, 2020. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition call in every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Smart takes.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Well, Wednesday turned out to be an eventful day in Big Ten country, with football announcing its return and also the announcement from the NCAA of when the upcoming basketball season, yes, that's right, the upcoming basketball season will begin. So we at least have a date to look forward to at this point. November 25th, sorry, I wish it was October 25th, is out there, which is about 70 days, about 10 weeks from now. So, this time in 10 weeks, it'll be Thanksgiving, and we'll have hopefully a day of college basketball under our belt. So I don't know, after what has been the longest and weirdest offseason that we could ever imagine and hopefully will ever see, I'm glad that we at least have a date. A lot of things have come into this. We've talked about it, these past handful of weeks, where going through what can basketball side of things learn from football. They've done a better job of planning things out and trying to get ahead of things, and so now they've got the better part of 10 weeks to get everything in place, whether that be schedules, testing, all the things that are necessary to hopefully make the college basketball season happen. And even though it won't be normal by any stretch, whether that be number of games, where games are played, fans in the stands, all those kinds of things, it will likely be far from normal. I think I speak for all of us here when I say it will be a fun time to get back and be able to actually have a post-game show to talk about an IU basketball game, which hopefully will come somewhere on or around November 25th. So that is the easy call for this week's banner moment. And now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. He's one of the most dedicated Indiana fans on earth, and as one of the co-hosts of Crimson Cast, he's one of the true OGs of Indiana sports podcasting. He also clearly underrates Tom Coverdale's performances in clutch situations.
Coverdale's like a real early James Harden.
He is. Scott Caulfield. Scott, welcome. Thanks for joining me tonight. And what's on your mind with the big announcements in the Big Ten this week?
Andy, thanks for having me, and great to see you. I'm so happy that the Big Ten decided to drop this for me on the Ace. When I come on Assembly Call Radio, you guys invited me earlier in the week, and I'm like, yeah, I'd love to join. I don't know what we're going to talk about. And then, I put a call into the Big Ten.
Definitely bailed out in a big way by Wednesday's news.
Yes, and pushback. We had a lot of great segments. We were going to talk about all in depth of the 1924 season, dig into 25. No, it's good. I mean, I will paraphrase something. Galen and I did a podcast this afternoon. It's posting up sometime soon on Crimson Cast. But I will just say he mentioned something I think is something that needs to be said for all of us. Like, it's okay for us to be happy this is back. There's a lot of things tied to this. There's a lot of pieces where we can be concerned about, the health and safety of students. I think those are all true things too, but we're all sports fans. And like, it's okay to be happy and excited that IU athletics is coming back. And so, I kind of want to focus on that vein. Like, I'm fired up, football's coming back. And I think this also means that for sure basketball is coming back. I know it was announced, but I was kind of concerned the Big Ten was going to be kind of, stuck in this spot where it's like, maybe we can't play basketball because we're not playing football. Like, now for sure we're going to have basketball. If everyone else is playing, the Big Ten will be playing now, because they're definitely not going to back out of basketball if everyone else is playing after they kind of just foul that up with football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping in the same way that even the NCAA from a basketball perspective has learned from some of the lack of planning from a football standpoint. Yeah. I think the Big Ten obviously has a lot of lessons to learn on a variety of fronts, regardless of your political viewpoints and anything else. I think the kind of public relations handling of it was pretty much poor from start to finish, and now they even coming back have a little bit of egg on their face with some of that. But yeah, I'm like you, excited to have that to look forward to, and seems like they're putting the right protocols in place to protect people as best they can. So with that, this week we're going to talk about a handful of Hoosier headlines. We'll spend most of that time really talking a little bit more about football. The Crimson Cast episode is out, so certainly would encourage people to listen to that. I listened to it this evening. So as always, Scott and Galen are great sources for IU football discussion. And then we're going to talk about what we know, what little there is we know about the framework of the college basketball season. And then we got a few listener questions that we'll sprinkle in here, and potentially some in-depth cameo discussion to be had later in the show. So all of that coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to that, though, quick announcement to continue to support our friends at Home Field at homefieldapparel.com. You can use the promo code Assembly20 to get 20% off your purchase. They have continued to roll out their schools as part of Big News Saturday. I think they're on week 9 or 10. At this point, Auburn was the record setter, I believe, after last week, and based on hints this week, looks like Colorado State. So potentially some good stuff to be had there. But as always, a lot of great IU apparel that is out there. Something pick something up for the October return to football and the November return to basketball for sure. And again, you can use the promo code Assembly20 to save 20% off. So Hoosier Headlines this week did have a media appearance from Kenya Hunter, new assistant coach Kenya Hunter. Had some discussion about that. Scott, we've talked about the hire on the show over the last few weeks since it was announced, but just kind of curious to get your early impressions of Kenya Hunter, whether that came from the media appearance this week or just other stuff you've read about him as the addition to the staff.
No, I mean, I think it's good. I think his recruiting ties are good, and the proof will be in the pudding. I mean, I think Bruiser Flint was there to be kind of the recruiting coach, and I think the same thing here. I mean, I think it's all good. I mean, the thing is, like, I've never been assistants. Kind of, it's something to talk about, but it's like in the end, I'm not sure how much it's going to affect. Like in the end, what we have seen is that under Archie, things are more stable than the last 4 years. You've seen a growing uptick in the number of 4 and 5 star recruits. We've got I think 4 Mr. Basketballs in a row, or 3 or 4, like the most in. It's been a while since I've done the research, like most in a long period of time. So things are going in the right direction. My only hope is that it all sounds good. I like the hire. I just hope that it didn't disrupt anything that we had going, because we did seem to have a lot of positive momentum in recruiting. But it's one of those things where the proof will be in the pudding. Unfortunately, with kind of the recruiting assistants, you don't know it for like 18 to 24 months. There's a really long tail on these things. So I think it's good, but you can't say like, oh, we just signed somebody tomorrow. Like, it really has nothing to do with that. So, we'll probably know in 2 years when unfortunately it's too late.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where, initially after the hire, they put out a few offers to guys that he had some ties with back at UConn. I think if you get some of those guys, again, kind of taken at face value that, the quality of their play is worthwhile. I think getting somebody that you or a couple guys that you maybe hadn't been in on outside of him would be, at least a potential early indicator that there's some benefit to be had there. But yeah, like you said, and like we've said before, so much of what these guys do is behind the scenes that we really don't have enough visibility to say this guy is really making a difference versus maybe he's not. So, but anyway, I thought there was some good stuff. I know they had a write-up on Inside the Hall about him and just, some of the things that different people, not just Archie, were talking about with him. So seems like a pretty well-rounded guy, and wasn't clear whether he would be, working with the bigs or the backcourt guys. So maybe more to come on that. Logan Duncan, the highest riser in the Rivals 150. Up 51 spots to number 88. I think he had jumped up in the 24/7 rankings that we went over a week or two ago. So I think a lot of positive momentum for him on the recruiting side of things. And then football is back. So, Scott, I know you guys talked about this, so we'll try not to cover a lot of the same ground. So just to kind of give everybody the basics. So games will start October 24th. Maybe that's why I said October 25th for basketball. Maybe not. There'll be 8 games, all 8 consecutive weeks. No bye weeks, no off weeks built in. I think that is going to be one of the challenges to see how they navigate that with really not leaving themselves any wiggle room. And then at the end of that, everybody will get 1 extra game. You'll be basically play the like placed team East versus West. Although I saw something that they said they may try to avoid rematches if they can, so maybe there's a little bit of flexibility with that. Seems like so far no fans, at least outside of maybe family, no tailgating. Disappointing to Coach. I'm sure no truth to the rumor that's why Coach is not on, that he's just in mourning because of not being able to tailgate. I'm sure he'll set something up at his house. It'll be fine. IU started daily testing today. The Big Ten starts covering the cost of that come the end of the month. And then scheduling wise, this is kind of the interesting part. Everybody goes immediately to the negative end of this, which is reasonable. Lee wrote in, IU football will schedule 8 games. Will IU play 4 games each against Ohio State and Michigan? Hopefully not. So basically the way the 8-game schedule will work, at least as I understand
it's going to be 3 against Ohio State, 3 against Michigan, and 2 against Michigan State, and 1 against Penn State.
Yeah, maybe Penn State. Yeah, exactly. So they'll play the 6 teams in their division, and then they'll have 2 crossover games. So I have to think they'll keep the protected rivalry as one, which would be Purdue. The other one is the question mark for IU. I saw Zach Osterman tweet something out that basically somebody had said that the 9-game schedule the Big Ten released days before, saying they weren't going to play the season, had basically had that they would keep 2 of those 3 crossover games. So the 3 that IU had at that point, as best I could tell, were Purdue at home, at Wisconsin, Illinois at home. So Zach speculated that the Wisconsin one is the one that they would keep because it would balance out the home road piece. I am, given the Eastern Division schedule, I'm hopeful that perhaps that is not the case, but time will tell about how the schedule goes. So I guess, Scott, without really knowing, the schedule is the big unknown at this point, whether it'll be front-loaded, back-loaded. IU's kind of seen 2 different versions of that, where I think the original version of the full schedule, you felt pretty good getting past that Wisconsin game. The 9-game schedule seemed like it flipped on its head and got off to a really rough start. So we don't know that yet. But, kind of initial thoughts about how the Big Ten makes the schedule work, what, concerns you may have with the, 8 games back-to-back, no wiggle room type of thing, just whichever way you want to go from a football perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you haven't read Osterman's article in the Indy Star, it's really well done. And I think it does kind of highlight that, the way that Big Ten has gone about this process by being so definitive early and then now kind of turning course, they really box themselves into a corner, because obviously they want to get this done by December 20th to get into the national championship discussion, or have whatever team wins the Big Ten be there. But they're going to have their final game December 19th. They literally have no wiggle room. And so you have 8 games in 8 weeks. You don't have the possibility for any kind of canceled game if you want to get those 8 games that you can't play 2 in a week. So it's tough to even look at this because you've already seen a couple. I think it was like Virginia Tech had to be canceled or postponed. Like North Carolina's having some issues. So it's hard to even look at this with an eye, because like my biggest fear, knowing just like as an IU football fan, is like our game against Rutgers is going to somehow get postponed and we're going to end up playing Michigan 3 times. Like back to Lee's question, it's like they'll be like, just play Michigan a couple times, or you're already there. So I mean, I think that is what is tough, but. Here's what I say from a grander standpoint. When you look at it, like I do think this does provide some real opportunity for Indiana football, and that, playing in places like Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State, it was tough because you had 100,000 fans already. These big stadiums are still going to be big stadiums. Now they're going to be empty. And it wasn't really a reciprocity thing where Memorial Stadium really didn't provide. I mean, I love Memorial Stadium. It's great, but it didn't provide the same kind of, home field advantage that you would like at the Big House in Michigan. So a lot of what those other teams had is a little bit negated. And I also truly think, as I look at this, and again, I haven't scouted all the other teams in the Big Ten, but unlike a lot of years, Michael Penix is really something different back there. And if he's healthy, he's a tough guy to scout for. And especially if you're week 5, if you're playing IU and you're Michigan, you just come off 4 straight weeks, like you don't have a ton of time to game plan. And it's not like, they're just running, the normal, as great as Tevin Coleman one. It's like, this is hey, we got, they're going to pass to Tevin Coleman. Let's just play our standard, run package defense. Like Penix can gun it. He can run it. He can throw short. He can throw deep. And you got a lot of things to go there. So I wonder if our ability to kind of play a unique style with our quarterback allows us to be a really hard matchup in this. So I don't know. I mean, the only other thing that I thought about, mentioned on our pod earlier, was, if they keep the IU Purdue game protected as the last game of the quote unquote regular season, it sounds like then the way they're going to finish off is the top team from each division plays each other. If IU and Purdue were at the same level, you theoretically, I guess, could have a scenario where IU and Purdue play the bucket and then the week later play again for not the bucket, but they play for bragging rights to go to Detroit or something. Like, I don't know how that's going to look. But I think IU and Purdue's rivalry is probably the least important thing the Big Ten has to worry about right now. Maybe we just have two buckets in the year. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I did see something. I think it was somebody talked about Barry Alvarez saying this, that they still may try to avoid some of those rematch type scenarios, but you'd be going against what you were doing. But maybe right. It's if you're the fourth place team, then maybe you end up playing the fifth place team instead, or the third place team. I don't really know. The other thing that you guys touched on a little bit was bowl eligibility and how that all works. Will there actually be bowl games? I mean, I think the Big Ten will continue to proceed as if there will be bowl games, and it, one of those where how many wins do you have to get? I mean, if you end up playing, you're going to end up playing 9 games. So do you need to finish 5-4? Will there be enough teams? I think there's a lot of those kinds of questions. And then, what you do if somebody has to, can't play a game because they, have to quarantine a certain number of people. Like, does that count as a forfeit? Does it count as a win for the, how does that actually like factor into some of those different things? Will definitely be interesting to see. But, is there anybody that you think, and maybe it's IU to your point before, one of the questions I had was kind of like, who does this potentially benefit? I think to your point, the road situations where, you've got all those people, bearing down on you, the noise, the, having to adjust what you're doing snap count wise, those kinds of things. I think even in some cases, just what that brings to the gravity of different moments. I think about IU going to some of these places and playing really well, and do you all of a sudden look around and like, holy crap, I'm in this game at the big house, and kind of the gravity of what you're trying to do, sets in on you. That doesn't happen now. Are there other things or attributes of teams or whatever that you think might really be able to benefit from whatever this new setup is going to look like, even though we only have a kind of high level idea of what that actually is?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the two teams that I would look at is like, honestly, I hate the idea of playing Wisconsin because I think they could really benefit from this just because they have an identity. I mean, you're kind of seeing it in the NBA bubble. It's not the best example, but like teams that kind of understand like what they are, like the Heat know who they are, and they're killing it in the bubble, at least maybe not tonight, but they've been doing well. Wisconsin is basically been the same team for 25 years. And so they have what they have, they run what they run. I think they could benefit from this. And I also think, and again, I haven't done enough to look at this. I think Michigan quarterback is looking to transfer or, maybe leave early. A couple guys from Ohio State have been looking to maybe just not play. I think what it could benefit is maybe a team like a Penn State or like Minnesota or somebody who's like not at that upper level, but just right below it. If they get a couple of their guys to stay, and then you have a team like Ohio State or Michigan where a couple of their stud guys like, look, I'm not going to mess this. I'm just waiting for the draft. You could have a situation where those teams that might've finished like in the top 20 could suddenly be playing for a national championship, or at least be the Big Ten representative going to that. So I think you could see a shakeup where you see teams that like Penn State's kind of that example, like they're probably not they're just a tad below Ohio State, but maybe this year they'll get above that because of guys who aren't playing. So, I mean, that's what I would say. And again, I'm a homer. I don't know. I think this benefits Indiana. I just really do. I mean, we're, for the reasons I mentioned before. And again, I'm a homer, and if there's ever a year for us to have a good year, it would be an odd year like this. And by the way, if we finish second in the Big Ten in a COVID year and everyone's like, well, that doesn't count, it's like, you can go pound sand, because I will take it all day long. If we make the Big Ten championship, it's like done. And also too, last thing is like, if we beat Ohio State, if there's no fans there, like, I don't care. Like, you could tell me, oh, there was no fans in the horseshoe. Who cares? Like, I care. Because guess what? We've played 35 years. We can't do it without fans. Like, we don't need to set the bar higher. It's like, just beat them once in my lifetime would be awesome.
Yeah, nobody needs to put asterisk by anything, for sure. I'm right there with you on that. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think another thing, teams that have a fair amount of continuity that aren't looking to integrate a bunch of new pieces. I mean, you didn't really have spring the way you normally have it. You've had some workouts. You've had different things. So I think that's another. Again, I'm like you. I haven't really looked across the conference enough, but IU does have a little bit of transition on the coaching staff from an offensive coordinator standpoint. However, depending upon how much of that is kept and is the same, maybe there's not a huge change there. So I think continuity will be important because you at least know what to expect from one another as you go through that part of the process. So it'll be interesting to see, but good to have it to talk about. And I'm sure somehow all IU fans are waiting to just see how the schedule does not shake out in IU's favor. But we'll find that out soon enough, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know.
All right. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about the basketball announcement that was made coming up next. Kind of what do we know at this point? What are some of the outstanding questions we have? So we'll hit the hoop side of things next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Glad to have
y'all.
Some stuff to talk about for sure. Let's see, 2036. All right, so we went about 20 minutes there, which is completely fine, given what we got. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like we were talking about this a little bit before the show. It's like I don't even remember or know enough to, I didn't really look at any like preview stuff that was coming out about anybody in the Big Ten to really know.
Yeah, it's like it wasn't happening 2 days ago. It's like
who's back, not back. I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens with some of these guys. Like I know you guys talked about like Rondale Moore, and I know there were a couple of Ohio State guys, somebody from Michigan that like had announced they were going to leave.
Are they going to come back?
Are you able to come back? Did you already go like sign with an agent and start working out and do stuff that all of a sudden the NCAA is going to be like, sorry. So I'm curious to see about that kind of thing. And even if some people are like, hey, look, playing 8 straight weeks, is that really what I want to do? Is it? I don't know. I don't know that anybody else would opt out that hasn't opted out already, but I'll be curious to see how they handle these guys who, and I guess it probably depends what they've done. I mean, just announcing that you're leaving isn't binding necessarily, but
well, and also like you used to be able to play like 3 or 4 games before without having to use a red shirt. Like, are they gonna? Was it based on percentage? Because I think it was
like
games.
Scale that
before,
back
like,
maybe, and
they're gonna have to. I mean,
but boy, you might. Yeah, I mean, because I guess if you played 4 games, because I think it was like 3 or 4 games. I mean, if you played 4 games this year, that's half the season.
Half the season. Yeah,
feels like no, but this is a year that potentially you may need more guys that you've got to get to step up and play and do whatever. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what all the little nuances are that come up.
I
don't know. Oh well, yeah. I mean, I would like to think that maybe this can be, it's not like normal years have worked out really well for IU in the past. So maybe the most abnormal of abnormal years is really what it might take to get over the hump. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, and also like Galen brought up, like he brought this up and it kind of gobsmacked me, but then I've thought about it more. It's like, maybe there's a team that doesn't play, like maybe Maryland's just like, we're not in. Like, just because the Big Ten's playing doesn't mean all the Big Ten teams are playing. Yeah. It would be hard to believe that like a team would bail out, but it's like, it'd be, yeah.
Well, and I don't know what the monetary implications of that would really be for anybody. Like if you say you don't want to play, are you not getting your cut of whatever it is?
Right.
I mean, I that's certainly what a lot of people have made it out to be, is like all about money, which is probably a fair portion of it for sure. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious of like, would you pass that up, or what situation would present itself that you would end up saying, hey, I'm going to pass this up? But
well, and this just goes to highlight like just how stupid it is to have Maryland and Rutgers in the Big Ten, because it's like if you got rid of them, it's like really you could do everything in a bus ride. I mean, the Penn State bus ride would kind of suck, but if you did.
Oh, still there? I'm not sure if it's Scott or if it's me. I think looks like it's Scott that's frozen. All right. We'll wait for him to hop back on here. I'm assuming that it is. Yeah. All right. I think we lost Scott. Yeah, I was just looking in the chat. Want to make sure it wasn't that it wasn't me, but I think it's not. So we'll get Scott back. We are not much to Joel's chagrin, not going to the one-man show. That could get dicey. That
there we go.
Get dicey. All right. You're back.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, did Scott freeze or was it me? Luckily, it was.
It was me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's better. All right. Sorry, Joel. No one-man show. He's back. All right. All right. Let's talk a little.
Sorry, Joel.
Let's talk a little basketball. I don't think anybody wants to hear me, including me, doesn't want to hear me talk for that period of time. So
I wouldn't want to talk that long either.
We will hop in. So, like I said, what kind of layout we know about this? There's not a ton of questions we can answer. I think the scheduling stuff is the biggest part, and then I did see something about the selection stuff, so I might speak to that a little bit, which is
Go for it.
somewhat horrifying, depending upon how they actually handle this. But we'll see. So, all right, I'll start us here in a second.
Hi, this is AJ Moye. What's the only thing better than upsetting Duke in the Sweet 16? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach for the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers!
All right. Thanks, AJ, and welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays and see all the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms here with special guest Scott Caulfield from Crimson Cast, and we talked a little football about the announcement from this week earlier on, but this is largely a basketball show, so we would be remiss not to talk about that. So as I mentioned in the opening, what we know about the basketball season is that it is set to begin on November 25th, which is the day before Thanksgiving. Gary Parrish, Matt Norlander talked about this a little bit on their podcast. I think the main driver behind that seemed to be that at that point, I think somewhere upwards of 70% of schools basically we're going to have students not on campus. IU will be one of those, and so they talked about wanting to try to wait so that maybe the players were less were around fewer other students. I think also maybe a secondary benefit is that it starts on a Wednesday. You're right before Thanksgiving. It's not a day that you're sharing with college or pro football, which bodes well, and the NCAA has had some issues with in the past, just in terms of basketball starting on days that it might not get its due. So at this point, everything that's out there is really kind of a general framework. They've got some suggestions or recommendations, if you will, in terms of non-conference games. They'd like everybody to play at least 4, but it's not a mandate. So what with IU, this is really the big thing, Scott, that I wanted to touch on first, because we did get a couple questions around scheduling. So basically, the situation is IU can play up to 27 games, which I think is 4 less than what is normally out there. And so if you start doing the math with what's out there, it gets interesting pretty quick. So you figure Big Ten is still going to play 20 conference games. I haven't seen anything that suggests that's not going to happen. IU would still plan to play in the Maui Jim Maui Invitational in apparently Asheville, North Carolina, or Indianapolis, which is obviously going to be probably held at a different time. But that's 3 games there. Big Ten ACC Challenge, which I saw a couple tweets today that suggested it might get pushed back, but I think they'll want to have that from a TV perspective. That's always a good TV event. IU, I believe, is scheduled to play in the Gavitt Games, Big Ten Big East, which is always early in the season, so that one definitely would have already been played by the time the new season start date is, so that one will get pushed back if not canceled. Then you got the Crossroads against Butler. I mean, if assuming all 3 of those events go forward, you've used 6 of your 7 games right there, and then you only got 1 left. And IU had previously announced games against NJIT, Robert Morris, Western Michigan, and then against Nebraska Omaha. So I'm not sure whether, I think Maui certainly happens, but whether all 3 of the Big Ten ACC Gavitt Games, Crossroads games happen is kind of unclear. Maybe they can have the Butler game count for both the Crossroads and the Gavitt Games to save time. And then you've got one other game to schedule. So, Scott, how do you think that plays out? I mean, do you think one of those gets nixed, like IU backs out of the Gavitt Games and wouldn't end up playing that one? Like, how do you figure you do that, or is the schedule just going to be that difficult and you really only have one quote unquote bye game in a year like this?
Yeah, I mean, this is like Tom Crean's nightmare of like no cupcake. I mean, by the way, like at Georgia, he definitely, I'm sure right now, Georgia, he's trying to get out of all these games and like trying to play 35 games against Robert Morris. I mean, I think it's just the way it is. I mean, this is something I've been thinking about with college basketball is so many of these programs like, the Southern Mississippi, so the kind of these smaller schools, like they made their money off of just playing 30 road games around the country. They can't do that anymore. And so I do think it's going to be this difficult because I don't think I haven't looked into I'm not going to. I say like I haven't. I'm not going to dig into the contracts, but it's like I don't think Indiana, if they're in the Gavitt games, could just back out. I mean that's two conferences set up. Like if they're in the Big Ten ACC, they can't just back out of that. Maybe they can get out of the Maui Invitational, but Maui, like whatever that is, wherever it is, they want to still have that. I think you're kind of committed to all of this stuff based on contractual obligations. And those are the marquee games people want to see. I mean, the plus side is everyone's going to have the same problem. Like if you're Illinois, if you're Iowa, like every other team in the Big Ten and every other major conference is going to have the same issue where you're basically just playing a pretty brutal schedule. But, we're hoping Indiana's going to be top of the Big Ten, top 5 in the Big Ten. And so really it's like, all right, we're playing with the big boys. We have a really good team. Let's go out there and show it. I mean, I think the one to me, it's like the one that would be easiest to back out of because there's probably less contractual obligations to be the Crossroads. But to me, it's actually the easiest one to play. It's like all the 4 schools are here. And theoretically, if you're trying to do kind of a pseudo bubble thing, you could play 2 games. You could play Indiana Butler, Indiana Notre Dame, swap it around. Just don't play Indiana Purdue. And you could have that way all the 4 teams could get 2 games in instead of 1. You could do it over the course of like 2 days, all in Indy.
Yeah, that's one of the things they've talked about with some of these other tournaments is like they're going to get these teams in the same place. I know they're hosting some of these events in Orlando. And then it's like, well, even if you weren't going to play – you happen to not draw a particular team, but you're both in the same place. You're already in that bubble, kind of what you described with the Crossroads. Like, would you go ahead and just play that game? You're limiting your exposure in different things, and you have that. The Gavitt games is the one that's odd to me because I think your obligation is that you have to play so many times within I forget what the number of years is, within a X year period. And so I know I used on some of that. I think there was some speculation of whether they play this year or next year. Like maybe you could do that, but then you got to find another Big Ten team to take your spot. So it's not like you can just say, I'm not going to do it. But I would also imagine some of the Big East teams are going to get squeezed in the same way. And maybe you just don't make that one work. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think the Crossroads is the easiest one to do. I think what it ends up meaning is you don't really have that, kind of on ramp of games where you get some things under your belt, maybe, play a couple lesser teams and get yourself there. But I think the other thing that some of these, smaller teams are going to be faced with, probably Western Michigan maybe is the exception of the ones that IU already had on the schedule. But, a lot of the things with these smaller schools is like they can't afford to do the same level of testing that the Big Ten is going to, require or do. So how much are, major conference teams really going to want to even put themselves in that potential scenario to schedule some of these guys, which really puts everybody in a difficult position. So, schedule strength could be at an all-time high this year for sure for IU as they go through and try to figure that out. But yeah, I don't see the Big Ten backing out of the 20, and then I don't see them getting out of Maui because again, it's kind of a potential like pseudo bubble. You're going to get some good games out of that.
Well, and
if you could move it to a year that you could actually go to Maui, perhaps that would be an option. But I don't know that that's really on the table at this point.
Well, and again, like, we're trying to divorce, like, there is a real pandemic, there is a real virus, and I don't want people to get hurt or sick. So, like, let's divorce that from this. But like, there is the real fact of like, if Indiana backs out of the Maui Classic, but they still have the Maui Invitational, and they still have it. It's like these are tournaments that teams bid to get into, and it's not like we're just guaranteed to go to Maui every 4 years. So it's like if we back out and we put Maui in a bad spot and they got to, some other team will step up and like, all right, we'll play. And then it's like, they get in like Virginia Tech or something. And it's like, all right, well, in 4 years when Indiana wants, like now you want to come back when it's in Maui and things are going well. It's like, man, forget you, man. We're going against somebody else. I mean, I think there is some of that too, that you're not guaranteed to go to that. Like the people bid to go to these conferences. The Maui one's going to be fun because the naming of it was already stupid because it was like the Maui Jim Maui Invitational. And now it's going to be like the Maui Jim Maui Invitational from North Carolina. Like it's just going to be the super long name. I just hope they at least still do the gimmick where the guys wear the Hawaiian shirts. Like, just have the coaches wearing the Hawaiian shirts in Indy in December. That'd just be really funny to me.
Yeah, where they would they would have different contests and stuff outside, have a luau, do the whole thing. Just pretend as if everything is the same, that you've just moved it to a different location.
Luau outside of Banker's Life, just on Georgia Street. Yeah.
What could go wrong? So the other thing that kind of came up, and I haven't really seen this confirmed, but there was some, in some point there was a quote from Dan Gavitt that suggested that the net for this year may be obsolete. Some of that, I think we've talked about a little bit. I think when Coach and I were on a couple weeks ago, talking about how some of that really needs there to be non-conference games to be able to, establish which conferences fall where. Said it may be obsolete for this year, and they may go back to relying on the eye test. So that is potentially, terrifying for really everyone. I do think the selection process, all kidding aside, is going to be impacted by this. How it'll be a little bit tougher to tell, but I think some of these mid-major teams are going to have a, if they don't draw somebody in one of these exempt events, I think they're probably going to have a hard time getting games against some of the better teams that might really put them on the map. And then otherwise, if you have teams that really just didn't go out and happen to play very few non-conference games, some people might play none. The 4 games is really just a suggestion. So the selection process could get a little hairy as we go through and try to figure that out. But I guess having a selection process would suggest that you've made it through the season to that point. So I guess that's a good problem to have. But yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I mean, what I would say, if Dan Gavitt's listening, Dan Thurstoff, thanks for the approval. Please tweet and like us. No, but what I would say is, I think the opposite. I think the net obsolete, but I think you should have, I think it's kind of, it was, Krzyzewski brought it up, the idea of having everybody in the tournament. I think it's a little bit nuts, but I don't know if there's not a reason to, you could still have, you rely on the eyeball test, but then why not just put everybody else in the NIT? Just have everybody else in another tournament and just get everybody playing some kind of tournament. You need to recoup some cost. You had no tournament last year. It's not like people are going to be why was everybody in the NIT that year? It's I'm okay thinking about the idea of expanding the tournament just for this year, just to get more teams to play, just so there's more games to watch and more games to have money be made off of. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read Matt Norlander had an interview with Gavitt and talked through some of that stuff. It didn't seem, he kind of asked some questions about potentially expanding. Didn't necessarily seem like that was completely on the table. And even he kind of took it the other direction, Matt Norlander did, was to say, would you even have the first 4 in Dayton? Because now you're trying to get all these teams just, if you had your 4 regions, would you bubble up your different regions or whatever else. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it means for the tournament. I don't think it gets scaled back to any more than the 64 that it used to be. But I also don't know, how they would figure out how to expand it, but more to come on that. There's a lot of, kind of like I said, a lot of this is a framework. There's not a lot of details that are not available yet. And I think there's going to be tons of schools scrambling to try to figure out what they're going to do.
But I think when people talk about
stuff.
When people talked about expanding it, the initial thought, I think the backlash came from, 64 is the perfect number. And it's yes, or 68, whatever. But it's I get it. But I don't think expanding it has to be we're now looking to make it 128 forever. It's no, this is a different year. We're not going to have fans in the stands. We're not talking about doing that forever. At least I hope not. We're going to go back to some other version of normal. Why not for 1 year, just do 128 and knowing we all agree hey, this year is a little bit different. There's stuff going on outside of there's this thing called COVID. It is probably hopefully not going to be here in 2 years.
Yeah. All right. So other basketball wise, figured since we had Scott on, we've beaten most off-season topics into the ground, but Scott has not had the same chance to do that. So figured this would be a good chance to kind of get his thoughts. So wanted to ask him a few questions, some of the ones that we've been tackling here for the upcoming season. So we'll get to expectations here in a minute, Scott, but is there a specific player or aspect of this year's team that you're really looking forward to seeing the most?
That people playing basketball would be awesome. That I'm excited for that. No, I think I would like to see the continued growth of Trace Jackson Davis. I mean, he was so good last year. I think if he can put together a little bit more of a mid-range game, I think that would be really good. I like to see how some of these freshmen fit in. I mean, the thing that I'm excited about this year is for the first time in a while, it doesn't feel like we need freshmen to come in and immediately give us like 21 and 10 right off the bat. Like we were like, oh, Trace Jackson Davis is awesome. That's great because we need him to basically be our number one or number two player. In the year before, it's like we got Romeo, and like, great, Romeo, you got to be basically our number one scorer. Like this is the first time, we have Al Durham back, who's been there 4 years. Obviously, you have Trace Jackson Davis coming back. You have Rob Finney. I'd love to see a healthy, completely healthy, full Rob Finney year and see what he can do. We have Jerome Hunter again, hopefully coming back fully healthy. You have Race Thompson to build in there. Like I haven't talked about any of the freshmen yet. So to me, this feels more like one of the more consistent years that I remember, like going to games in the 90s where it's like, yeah, AJ Guyton's a rookie or a freshman. It's like, yeah, he plays 10 minutes and he doesn't play much more because that's what freshmen do. And you build your way into playing time. We haven't seen that in like 3 or 4 years. We've seen guys like, you got to come in and you got to do a lot because we need a lot of help. And we have this constant turn. So to me, that's the most exciting thing, is actually seeing growth out of players and seeing, freshmen being able to kind of do what normal freshmen do, which is have good games, go off the reservation for a couple of weeks, come back, and like not have to be like, we got to get stellar performances out of these guys. And, all credit to Chase Jackson Davis. Like that was a great, looking back again, like that was such a fantastic year from a freshman to basically be such a consistent player. They never had that like 2-week period where you're like, oh my gosh, like it's not happening. And, RIP Devontae Green. Like it's also going to be nice just not having the, Devontae Green game. I enjoyed him, but not having the games where it's like, oh God, like it's kind of like Marcus Smart with the Celtics now I'm watching. It's like, oh, Devontae hit 2 threes. Like, great. That's going to be 7 more bad threes. Like now it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that with the freshman stuff, because I think similar to what brought up with football around continuity and how much of a factor that might play. I mean, we tie that in with the schedule of not really having that on ramp of easier games or things like that. I think having a team that, yeah, you lost Devontae and Justin Smith, but the other core pieces of last year's team are back. You have to think that helps at least a little bit. As you would go through that scenario, and so maybe that gives them a leg up in some of these other games, just having those kinds of things. So in terms of how you see lineups, actually I'll ask you this question. The other week we talked about who we thought the kind of second most indispensable guy was outside of Trace. That's the obvious answer for number one. And so I think Al Durham was thrown out, Lander was thrown out, Jerome Hunter. I think those were the 3 that kind of garnered the most attention. Finney, I think, was also in there. Do you have a viewpoint on who the next most indispensable guy is once you get past Trace?
I mean, it's got to be Joey Brunk. No, I would say I'm just trying to find somebody off the radar. I would say Finney. I mean, I really think it's Finney. When he is our starting point guard. There you go, that Mr. No Nonsense, or Mr. No kidding. No, I mean we haven't had him healthy. Like the few times that he's been like fully healthy, our offense has looked completely different. He's able to run the point, run the entire game. And when he's not in there, we've kind of had the Devontae Green experience last year where it became a much different style of offense. But if he's not healthy again this year, you're going to hand it over to, Franklin or, a freshman, or, Al Durham is so much better as a 2 guard. Like he was getting so good last year at driving to the basket, getting shots. He can play point, but I don't think that's where he's going to excel. So to me, everything gets set up with Rob Finney, and his 3-point shooting has been good. I think it can get better. I would love to see him. I want to see him have an entire year healthy. So I look at that as like he's maybe the second most indispensable player. The other person that I would throw out would be, again, Jerome Hunter. He's really, really good. Again, it's like an injury thing that we've got to get past on him. But if, he was one of our better 3-point shooters to end the year last year. And if you have a guy who's 6'9", who can pull the defense away from Trace and leave him, single covered down low on one-on-one coverage down low in the post, that's a huge advantage. And so I would say fantasy, but I would also put a lot of stock on Jerome Hunter as like he's also a very important player that if he comes back and he's as healthy, I mean, people forget he was the second highest recruit in his class. He just kind of fell off because of the injury and has just taken time to come back. And so honestly, this might be good for him because it's kind of like Michael Penix in football. It's like it's just more time for him to get fully back into game shape.
Yeah. So you alluded to this in one of your earlier answers in terms of like wanting to, see the team be top 5. And we've talked about this a lot. I mean, what are your expectations, or what do you think are realistic expectations for the team coming into the season, or maybe minimum expectations of yours in what is shaping up to be a really pivotal year for Archie?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was talking to you before we started, and I was talking to a couple other friends about this. Like, do you count last year as a tournament year for IU? I mean, obviously, I'm aware of COVID. I'm aware there wasn't a tournament. But, how is that chalked up? I mean, I guess the answer is yes with a big asterisk. But if it's not a no, it's not fully a yes. I mean, we're on the bubble. We probably are going to make it. And, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because it's like if we don't make the tournament this coming season, obviously there's a lot of extenuating circumstances. So you can't just say, all right, the seat's going to get hotter. But on the flip side, it's like that's 4 years. And there's real years that have gone by. And it's like I've really not seen Indiana in the tournament for 4 years under Archie Miller. And so I don't know. I mean, my expectations are I look at kind of Illinois as a good comp. When they hired Brad Underwood, they were in a very similar spot, if not maybe worse than where Indiana was. And, last year they were 21-10. They were ranked. They have a really good team coming back. I kind of stand by this. It doesn't take 4 to 5 years to turn things around if you really have everything together and you know what you're doing. You look at all of the coaches who've been very, very, very successful in college basketball. By year 3 or 4, things are turned around and they are on the trajectory for where they're going to be. Even I hate making the correlation, but even, I don't have it all in front. I really should have been a little more prepped. I apologize. But even like Crean in year, so 1, 2, 3, 4, Crean's 4th year, that's the year we beat Kentucky, where Christian Watford had a shot that people know about. We're 27-9. We go into the tournament. We play Kentucky really well. They in the Sweet 16. I mean, by year 4, he's in the tournament. By year 5, he's got the number 1 team in the country. And so it does, and we all have our feelings about Crean, rightly or wrongly. It's like by year 4, we were beating number 1 ranked teams in the country and going to the tournament as a protected seed. So we were a 4 seed that year.
Yeah, I think maybe 5.
Anyway, whatever. Yeah. I mean, we're a high seed. So I stand by that. Like there are a lot of extenuating circumstances that happened the last 2 years, but I still stand by year 4, any coach should be able to get this turned around. Not to mention Indiana's got the highest recruiting budget in the Big Ten. We have a lot of things on our side. So to me, the expectations are, top 5 Big Ten easily. You got to be in the top 5 of the Big Ten. In my mind, you can't just be eking into that 5th place spot. You should probably be in the top 4 or 3. And I think you need to be looking at making a legitimate run at the second weekend of the tournament, assuming the tournament, is not 128 teams. Like, hey, we 96. I mean, like under the normal rules of a normal tournament, you should be making, you can't just be, winning as an 8 seed and then getting boat raced by the 1 seed in the second round. Like you got to do a little bit more. And, part of this is because there's a lot of, unfulfilled expectations in the first 2.5 years of the Archie era that I think it's like the check is coming due. I don't think you can fire him after this coming season if things don't go right. But it's like at some point, like you're getting to that point. So that is the long answer to your question. My expectations are, top 4 to 5 in the Big Ten, being there strongly, and then a pretty solid showing in the tournament, whatever that tournament looks like. I mean, what were your? I've not listened to all of it. What are your expectations for this year?
I think it's similar. I think you want to be, I think a top 5 in the Big Ten, and if you do that, then you're comfortably in the tournament. I think that's really where you want to be. The fact that, we can debate, there's no tournament last year, so I can say that I felt like at the time that the season ended, they would have been in, but they wouldn't have been in incredibly safely. So I think that's the part that's, you can't be squeaking out a bid to the tournament. I think at this point in year 4, based on what they've got coming back. So we shall see. But all right, so coming up in our last segment, we are going to hit on IU people with IU ties on Cameo. So idea that Scott had. So stick with us here to talk about that on the Assembly Call.
See, we have enough to talk about. It's great. So, all right, to the chat mob who's out there, Joel is 100% right. We were on the IU was in. I agree, but I would say that, we were not like solidly in. We were in, but we were going to be an 11 or a 10 seed. Might have been a first 4 game and I think Joel also said, like, everyone forgets the injury season. Like, yeah, there were injuries, like, but you're in year 4. Like, you look at again, I didn't have it listed out, but again, like Crean year 4 was there. And I don't think Crean was the best coach we ever had. What Underwood's doing in Illinois, you look at what, Beard is doing in Texas Tech. You look at anybody in year 4 and it's like, they are on the trajectory of where they're going to be as a coach. And so if we're not competing for something solid in the Big Ten, Joel, a 10 seed's in the tournament. So yes. All right. So we're in the tournament, but it's like, so we got to be better than a 10 seed this year. So great. He made the tournament as a 10 seed, but it's like year 4, we got to have higher expectations than that.
Yeah. Cause I think conceivably, like, that's what they could have been last year. So if you're looking for, maybe 10, 11. So if you're looking for like continued improvement, I feel like I think there needs to be a jump. I think Jared said a few times, it's like, you've kind of taken small steps forward. Like, there needs to be a leap to kind of make up for the fact that the steps taken so far probably haven't been as big as everybody expected them to be.
Yeah. And again, I can't stress, we hammered this I talk about this all the time on the Crimson Cast. Like, I can't stress enough, just like the year with Romeo Langford where you lost like 11 in a row. It's like that bill has to be paid at some point. Like, that was such a disappointing season that you can't just be like, well, it sucked, but we're moving on. It's like, no, like, that sucked. Like, now you have to overperform, and you can't just underperform 2 times and then just suddenly do the bare minimum. Like, you still owe me an overperforming season. And for all everything I didn't like about Crean, he gave you that. Like, that 4th year of his, it's like they wildly overperformed.
Yeah. Yep. All righty.
Oh, it's exciting. I'm getting pissed about basketball again. This is good times.
Everything is happening. It's all.
I know. It's all back.
All right. So we only have 5 minutes left to do this, which I think is still fine. So I will. I just basically cut and pasted the first part of your email, but I won't read that verbatim by any means. But
yeah, I can set it up how it started, and then I can just do it real quick.
Yeah, we can do that. So then I figured we could just go I can quickly go through who's on here, and maybe we can kind of talk about best value or some of that. But then I think the fun part would be like if there's obscure guys who you'd love to see on there and like get a message from or whatever else. So I'll kick it to you to let you set it up, and then I can go through the guys and we can talk about who we think. Moye is clearly the best value based on the others. I think some of these are appropriately priced, but the Moye one is a steal comparative to the others. All right, so I will get us rolling here.
Hey guys, it's Gene Steratore, CBS officiating analyst and retired Big Ten basketball official. I have never listened to the Assembly Call, and to be honest, I don't intend to. But if you listen, make sure you ignore anything Ryan says about officiating. He's really good from the seat of his pants, but I wouldn't trust him on the court with a whistle around his neck. Time has proven him wrong on virtually everything. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Well, we're going to get another chance to hear that because apparently I did not hit record on that. So
right,
I looked back. I was like, oh, are we close to 5 minutes? I was like, no. So anyway, we can enjoy this little gem from Gene again here. All right.
Hey guys, it's Gene Steratore, CBS officiating analyst and retired Big Ten basketball official. I have never listened to the Assembly Call, and to be honest, I don't intend to. But if you listen, make sure you ignore anything Ryan says about officiating. He's really good from the seat of his pants, but I wouldn't trust him on the court with a whistle around his neck. Time has proven him wrong on virtually everything. Take care. We'll talk soon.
All right, thank you, Gene. I picked that one because it's good for our topic here in our final segment. So welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Scott Caulfield of Crimson Cast. And remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. So just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. So with that, Scott had this idea, so I'll let him set it up. We don't have a ton of time, but we'll at least go through here. So Scott, I'll let you set up your cameo-related idea for this segment.
Yeah, so I was messing with my neighbor who's been, I've talked on my podcast a couple of times, Michigan State grad, and I just like a way to mess with him, and he bought a flagpole, hasn't put a flag up yet. I have my Indiana flag flying, and so I went on to Cameo, and Gerald Holmes, who was a running back for Michigan State, was $8 to do a cameo. I'm like, best $8 I ever spent. So did a cameo where I just like, it was just like, hey, like mess with my buddy. It was great. And then my wife's birthday is tomorrow. I just kind of plan her on Cameo. I'm like, I can get her. She's a big Doctor Who fan, like The Office. Everyone from The Office is like $300. So I look at Indiana University and I pull up and there's all these guys from and actually not all these guys, but an interesting mix of guys from IU. I ended up going with Christian Watford for $20. Did a fantastic job. He talked about the watch shot. He says hi to my wife. Like it's a great $20. By the way, it's like helping out Watford. Like I love it. But I'm looking through some of these prices, and we're talking about things to talk about. Like, there's some really crazy people on here with prices, and just a weird mix of guys. Like, you have James Blackman, you have Zeisloff, you have Tim Priller for $15. He almost got picked. Patrick Ewing Jr., Freddie McSwain, Robert Johnson. You got Kyle Schwarber, not basketball, but $200. Juwan Morgan. It's an interesting mix. So I know we want to talk about value, and I think the value pick is pretty obvious here, and then who we'd like to see on there. So you kind of laid it out maybe in a better way than I have of who's on there and the prices. All
right, so we'll kind of go through the prices here. So Schwarber is at the top for $200. That feels a little steep. Antoine Randall there for $75. Alford for $50. So everybody can take up a collection to get us to do one for Ryan with Alford. Go down to $40. You got Juwan Morgan and Dan Dockage. $31. Odd amount Devontae Green. $25, Patrick Ewing Jr., James Blackman Jr., and Robert Johnson. $20, you got Watford, McSwain, Zeisloft, and Deron Davis. $15, you got Tim Priller. And then the clearer value pick, $10, AJ Moye. I need to work with AJ on his pricing, I feel like, because, I mean, $10 for that, especially in comparison to the others.
Freddie McSwain has doubled you up. Like, that's unacceptable. AJ Moye is at least $40.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, if you factor in like where people are on here, like Moye could very easily be in the 25, at least at a minimum, the $25 category. I think Watford even at 20 is a fairly good value there. So those are interesting. Any that stand out as the Schwarber one for $200. Like, I'm not sure that I could justify spending $200 on virtually anyone on there to get somebody to do something. So that one, kind of stands out.
Because in the end, it's like 20 seconds. Like, you get a 20-second video. It's great. It's personalized. They say exactly what you want to say, but it's like, you're getting 20 seconds of Schwarber. Like, to me, I'm not spending over $30, but it was fun with Wofford to spend it here. So you were going to talk about who we'd like to see on there.
So we got about a minute left. So give me a couple guys that you'd like to see on there. You don't have to give what you would be willing to pay, but give me a couple guys, maybe a mainstream guy, maybe somebody obscure that you'd like to see on there.
I'd love to see Coverdale. I'd love to see Isaiah Thomas, just because I think he would mess it up royally every single time. And you know who could easily charge, if you're listening, $100 easy is Chuck Crabb. You tell me I wouldn't want to have now starting, for The Office, a 6'4" sophomore, Scott Caulfield. Dude, Crabb could easily do that, $75 a piece. Like, everybody would get Chuck Crabb, right?
I think so. I think that's the clear pick. My obscure pick would be, I would for sure send this to my college roommate if I would pay for Larry Richardson to be on there.
Yes.
So that would be a good one. And then obviously Jared quickly chimed in to when you emailed about this with Cheney, which he said $100. I would take on good authority he'd be willing to spend more than that, but we'll see.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All right, so that will do it for us tonight on the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you heard on the show tonight. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night.
Take it from me, AJ Moye. Keep your elbows in, eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out. All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right. So we can hit a couple more pieces of that, but we did a good job of squeezing that into the little time that we had.
Yeah,
but,
we knew we'd run out of time. By the way, you search Purdue on Cameo, nothing. Will Purdue from the Bulls comes up. Like University of Purdue has nothing on there.
That's a shame. I'm sure I have not done anything on there. I know Jared's gone out and done all this stuff because I know like Yogi did one for us and he's on there, but it doesn't show as like active right now. I tried to look up a couple of the others because I think that's where Jared got the holes ones that we have, as well as him. The Sterator was $35, which there's not one time that I listened to that I don't enjoy it. So it was worth every penny of the $35 for that one. But I was trying to think of other guys who would be good to have on. I do think the Coverdale, the Chuck Crab was a fantastic idea. That guy would be good. That guy would
Chuck
be,
Crab would be awesome.
Chuck Crab would be like, he would be able to buy a second home with what he would get up from people doing that.
I mean, now the fact like this is on a podcast, I think if Chuck Crab ever hears this, like it's a 1%.
Yeah, I'm not sure how he finds out that this isn't a viable financial option for him. Yeah, nobody here is saying that we're going to figure that part out. But
he would need a cameo intern. But yeah, Crab would be. I mean, everybody like our age and older would be like, I want to hear. Yeah, somebody said Don Fisher. I think Don Fisher would be good too. But Crab is like just to get him to say sophomore. Like just get him to do intro lineups would just be fantastic.
That would be amazing. That's probably the clear answer.
I mean, but Don Fisher's not bad. You got to get on him soon. I mean, he's only got at least 25 more years, 30 more years in the booth.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, he's got plenty of time. I mean, the off season would have been the time for him to do it. So, those would be good. But one of my college roommates and I, we had definitely like loved Larry Richardson, so it would be pretty hilarious to be able to send him that. That would be outstanding.
I saw for those who are old enough and remember Hot Bod at Mars on Thursday nights, we used to go to that, and I grew up in Bloomington, a unnamed former friend of mine, not a girlfriend, but a friend who was female, used to go to do Hot Bod, and that was always fun for me seeing someone in high school go do that. But one day, Larry Richardson went up and was in Hot Bod at Mars. And it like tore the house down, like him and I think it was just him and somebody else, like Rod Wilmot or something. Like it was like Richardson was definitely up there. I remember that, and it was bonkers. Yeah,
outstanding. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anybody from like obviously the Cheney one would be good. I'm trying to think of other guys who just have like the personality to put like a really good spin on what it would be.
I think Isaiah Thomas would be good. I mean, we talked about in the 81 rewatch, like it is interesting. He doesn't seem to be thought of as like an IU guy much. Like he's never like one of the IU legends. I mean, I know he's been back and like he was back with Knight, but it's like he never gets kind of lumped into that. I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly, like, it's funny because like Moye is a great choice. Like the fact he's $10, like I might just buy him tonight just to be like, hey man, like I'm just telling you, like, charge more. Send me
just telling you to charge more. You can tell me whatever you want. You can tell me whatever you want, but I would like to know what they're doing. I'd be curious to know. I mean, that's one of the elements of the whole name, image, likeness stuff, where you could have current players go on and be able to do stuff, and be curious to see like what going rates for that would be and how they would regulate some of that. I know IU's been kind of on the forefront of that. We'll have to ask Galen since he's on the committee that they put together about that stuff. Like, I mean, I would assume this would all be part of what you'd be able to do and what you'd be able to make make from on there to see what it would be. So that would be interesting.
Jared Jeffries, Richie Carter said Jared Jeffries. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind like Jeff Newton, considering he's like the like a god in Japan, like he's a leading scorer of the Japanese basketball league.
I'd be curious to know for now. I mean, he's always was such like a soft-spoken guy. Like some of these guys who just don't say a whole lot. I mean, OG, I don't know what you'd pay for. You wouldn't get anything from him. I don't know how that would work. I don't know what the minimum word requirements are for what you'd have to give. But The Newton thing would be interesting. I mean, with Newton, I just remember like he played so well in that Final Four game against Oklahoma, and so he was the guy that they ended up like talking to. And I think, if I recall correctly, even had him and Davis on either during halftime of the other game, or there was a tournament game. Maybe it wasn't that Oklahoma game, although I did feel like he played well in that one. That they had him and Davis on, and he just was like just such a quiet kid, and just tell it he was uncomfortable, and they're trying to get stuff out of him or whatever. But I would assume that given his status in Japan, maybe he's gotten out of that a little bit. But
you could also have like Bracy Wright would be fun to just say like, hey, I'm the cavalry and I'm coming. Like it would be fun tongue in cheek. Like just have Josh
help
Smith.
is on the way.
Help is on the way. I have like Josh Smith. Like
I'm proud to be a member of the IU family. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I mean, Mike Davis, you could have fun with if he was willing to have fun with it. There's a lot of I mean, yeah.
Oh well, all right. Well, Scott, as always, appreciate it. We managed to, as you said, somehow find way to get through a show, so it was good. I was definitely glad that there was some breaking news on the football and the basket. Even the football front would have been probably enough, but the basketball front helped out as well, because these are getting a little rough. Although hopefully now that they have a date, maybe some of the scheduling stuff will start to come out, and we can talk about some of that, because we've typically done some schedule breakdowns of what the Big Ten looks like and all that stuff, which has not been possible to do at this point. So maybe at least some that will be there. This will be somebody turn the faucet on of off-season topics that maybe we can get to.
Yeah,
because this has been a long slog for sure.
Like I said, I feel for you guys doing this every week, but I'm happy to come back on anytime. So let me know.
Cool. All right. Well, we appreciate it, Chat Mob. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Had a fun.
Wait, do you have 5 more minutes? I got a story for the Chat Mob for who's left.
Oh boy, this is a good AC After Dark. Yeah, I'll even. All right. Well, I will at least record this, because sometimes I do a crappy job of recording some of these extra things for the podcast, as I did. I
love the After Dark stuff, but I love people who stick around. So
if we did this, so all right, I'll let you go. I tell you what, I won't even record it to put on the podcast. This is just for those who want.
Yeah, this is just the 6 people who are still watching.
All right, have at it.
So my wife and I moved to Westfield 4 years ago. And we just had our son, so he's like three months old. And my next door neighbor is like having a Halloween party on the night of Halloween. There's a little bit of backstory to back all this up. It all ties in, I promise you. And we have an inflatable pumpkin we always put outside that my oldest son loves. Like it has Snoopy on it and Woodstock. It's like just an inflatable pumpkin, whatever. So this Halloween party is going on. We didn't go to it, but we hear people going crazy. And at some point, I see somebody like come and grab our inflatable pumpkin and just like run away with it. And like, I'm like, God damn it. Like that's my kid. Like, I just don't want the pumpkin broken. Like, I don't care. People are drunk, having a good time. And so I come outside and they're like, oh yeah, sorry, man. Like Brian's an idiot. Like he's just going nuts. I'm like, yeah, well, can I, like, he's like went in the trampoline, was like shooting with it. And like, they have a fake basketball goal. Like, all right, whatever. So like the next day I see my neighbor and like they brought it back, and I'm like, yeah, he's like, sorry, man, we were all really drunk. Like, dude, like, I don't care. Like, I just didn't want it popped. Like, I mean, you have kids. Like, it's like my kid's favorite thing. So I'm like, no big deal. He's like, yeah, we got drunk. Like, hey, no, like, we're cool. We're neighbors. No problem. So all good. Next year I go to the party, and the party's great. Like, it's like literally like what you'd expect 31 people are watching. Thanks, Ari. It's exactly what you would expect a Halloween party in an 80s movie to feel like. Everyone is dressed up. Like everybody's wearing something. By the way, I wore my Bad News Bears jersey, and my wife, she's not gonna be happy I'm telling you this, but she wore. I grew up in New York before I moved to Bloomington, and I was a Mets fan, like the '80s Mets. So I have like a Mets batting practice jersey. So she carried that with a bag of salt. That was her cocaine, because like she's an '80s Mets player, and so that was her costume. So we're going around the party, and like the party's kind of wrapping up. And at some point, someone's like, "Oh man, you're the pumpkin guy." I'm like, "Yeah, like you're the pumpkin guy. Like, Brian messed with your pumpkin." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, like we're sorry. Like he was drunk." I'm like, "Yeah, like dude, I get it. Like I'm not that mad." And then like he's like, "Yo," like I hear him go over there. He's like, "Yo, man, like that's the dude. Like that's the dude. The Cardinal took his pumpkin." I was like, "Well, wait." I was like, "Get back over here, man." I was like, "What'd you say?" He's like, "Yeah, Cardinal like took your pumpkin. Like sorry, man, he was drunk." I'm like, "Yeah, but his name was Brian." Like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Brian Cardinal." He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Brian Cardinal, like guy who played at Purdue?" He's like, "Yeah, man, he was here. Like he was here last year. Like, dude took your pumpkin. Like I thought you knew." And I'm like, "No, but like Brian Cardinal? Like, I hate him. Like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, oh yeah, man, he was here. He was dressed like the guy, Fred from Scooby-Doo. I'm like, yeah, like that was Brian Cardinal. Like, are you kidding me right now? And so I'm like, what the hell? So yeah, and he's like, oh yeah, he just left. I'm like, well, text him. Like, I want to meet Brian Cardinal. Like, are you crazy? He was already left, and then like the next year, like last year, they were gonna have the party again. Unfortunately, my neighbor like had something with his job, couldn't do it, so the party didn't happen. So I've been like waiting to see the next. I'm hoping this year they have the party. I mean, now with COVID, who knows? But like, I guess my neighbor goes to a church up here that Brian Cardinal is a part of. He lives, I guess, like literally like a quarter mile down. I am 98% sure. I was taking a bike ride this morning on the Monon. I'm like 98% sure I saw Brian Cardinal because I take a ride about, the same time every day. There's a guy who looks almost just like him, and I know Cardinal lives right around by me. So yeah, it's like Brian Cardinal stole my kid's pumpkin, and I have the story, and it's like I've been waiting for 3 years to be like I thought about last year because I'm literally the driveway next to where this party is, like putting up signs. It's like pictures of Gene Katie being like, how dare you steal kids' pumpkins and shit like that. But yeah, it's my story. It's a very specific story. I've told other friends at work and they're like, yeah, who's Brian Cardinal? It's like you don't understand. Like for me, like that is like, he was my antichrist for like the entire time I went to college. But yeah, that's my story.
All you can see now is him somewhere in those knee pads, like
messing
around with that pumpkin
on it. Yeah.
Well, maybe
that's my story.
Yeah. Awesome.
So Brian Cardinal stole my kid's pumpkin. I got it back. Didn't pop it. From all I've heard, he's a super nice guy. Like my neighbor's like, dude, Brian's like the nicest guy in the world. Like I'm sure he is. Like I mean, again, I would always say like, I
mean, he'll have to be because you're predisposed to hate him based on any history that you've already had. So he better be a nice guy.
Well, and that is funny. Like one of the guys at the party was like, "Oh, I thought you were flying the IU." After I figured out who it was, like I thought you were flying the IU flag because you hate Brian Cardinal. Like, no, like I'm an IU fan. Like that's my guy. Like I mean, I was an IU fan, but no, I will always say like at that time, like Brian Cardinal's always one of those players. Like if he was on our team, I would have loved him. But it's just like you have to hate him because like I think he's like the Luke Recker corollary. Like you hate guys like that if they're not on your team.
Yep.
And by the way, side note, like if you want we're talking about cameo prices. I will do real quick and then we'll go. Basketball Reference. Everybody else in the chat mob, don't look this up. Like just don't be fair. Don't cheat yourself. What do you think Brian Cardinal made in his NBA career salary wise?
Oh, I'm sure it's well, how many years did he end up like playing in the actual NBA though? I needed at least a small hint.
All right, hold on. Well, I looked at Baseball Reference, which isn't going to show me a whole lot of his career.
He's going to be tough to find on there.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard. Brian Cardinal played 1, 2, 3, and Jesus Christ, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years in the NBA.
12 years in the NBA? Oh wow.
Yes.
That is way more than I would have guessed. 12. Well, God, for 12 years.
Yeah.
40 million?
You are. All right, let's see. Let's go to the chat mob.
I did not look. Somebody
said their version of Will Sheehy, very true. You are dead on, man. He made $39.3 million.
Unbelievable.
Which, by the way, I say this, like if Brian Cardinal if I ever meet him, like I would say, I mean this in the, honestly, like the most revering way. Like he's a guy who maximized his talent to make money in the NBA. Like
to make almost $40 million. Crazy.
I mean, that's way more. There's a ton of guys who are way better than him who never going to make that kind of money. I mean, like it's like, yeah. By the way, him and Brad Miller, like Brad Miller made, I think like 90 million.
Oh, he made a ton. Yeah, he made a ton because he signed at least one pretty big contract, I think, after he had played relatively well.
Yeah, but dude, Cardinal was playing in 2012 for Dallas.
Wow, that's wild.
44 games, 6 games a minute, averaging 1 point. I mean, he
never would have guessed that he played that many years.
Yeah, I mean that's
because I would have way undershot the number had I not asked you.
Would have been more fun to do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would have probably said he played like 4 years as opposed to 12, so that would not have helped. But
I mean, like I'm trying to think of I don't even know who. Like, I mean, like comparatively, I would say no question AJ Guyton was a more skilled basketball player.
Yeah.
And AJ Guyton played 3 years in the NBA and made $800,000.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I know. AJ Guyton played in the wrong era. If he played now, he'd be doing way better.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so.
All right. That's all I got.
Cool.
There you go, Chat Mob.
All right. Scott, good talking with you. Everybody
Awesome.
Enjoy the rest of the week. And stay safe.
Kent Davis, I am not loaded. I do not live in the same area as someone who made $40 million. I'm not loaded. He lives in a nicer gated area that I don't. But yeah, got to simmer it out on that, Kent. But thank you.
Nice. All right, cool. All right, thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody. Everybody stay
Thanks,
safe,
guys.
and we'll